The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, February 27th, Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. Gabriel was the son of a distinguished lawyer who held a number of important positions on behalf of the government of the States of the Church, Francis Possenti. He had 13 children, the 11th of whom was the future saint, who was born in 1838 and received the name Francis at baptism. Some of the saint's siblings died in childhood. His mother died in 1842, when Francis was only 4 years old. Mr. Possenti had just been appointed chief assessor of Spoleto, where Francis received most of his education at the Jesuit school. Unlike so many other lives of aspirants to canonization, in which legend has introduced a series of surprising facts of dubious taste, the childhood of Francis Possenti, like that of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, was perfectly ordinary. It is not said that he had visions at the age of 4, nor that he invented extraordinary forms of penance before the age of 8. On the contrary, it seems that he possessed a vehement temperament, which he did not always know how to control, and that he was very meticulous in matters of dress and personal appearance. He read many novels, was very cheerful, and frequently went to the theater, although the plays he saw had nothing scandalous about them. His cheerful character and his physical attractiveness made him very popular. Although there is no reason to believe that he lost his baptismal innocence, nor seriously the law of God, it is certain that during his life as a religious, the saint did not look favorably on that first part of his life. He later wrote to a friend, "Dear Philip, if you really love your soul, stay away from bad company and do not frequent the theater. I know from experience how difficult it is to get out of it in a state of grace. At least it constitutes a grave danger. Avoid worldly gatherings and bad reading. I believe I assure you that if I had remained in the world, I would not have obtained the salvation of my soul. Tell me, don't you think I had enough fun? Well, the result of all this is nothing but bitterness and fear. Do not laugh at me, Philip, for I am speaking to you with my heart in my hand. I beg your forgiveness if I have ever offended you, and I take back all the evil I may have said about others in front of you. Forgive me, and ask God to forgive me also." Probably the self-accusing tone of this letter is due to the sensitivity of conscience that the saint developed during the novitiate, but it is not impossible that his youthful years were relatively frivolous, since his friends called him, no doubt with some exaggeration, il damarino, that is, the infatuated one. Perhaps Saint Gabriel did not heed God's call the first time he made himself clearly heard in his heart. Before finishing his studies, which were to open to him a promising career in the world, he fell seriously ill and promised to enter religion if he recovered his health, but when he recovered he did nothing to fulfill his promise. A year or two later, an attack of laryngitis again brought him to death's door. He renewed his promise and commended himself to the intercession of the martyr Jesuit Andrew Bobola, who had just been beatified. Having miraculously recovered his health, he asked to be admitted to the Society of Jesus. He was accepted, but he delayed his admission because perhaps he doubted whether God was calling him to a life of greater penance, and besides, he was only 17 years old. At that time, cholera took away his favorite sister. In the novitiate of Mortification, where he arrived in September 1856, he received the name of Gabriel della Dolorosa. Gabriel's life became from then on an extraordinary effort to attain perfection in little things. Those who had the opportunity to know him were impressed by his lucidity, his spirit of prayer, his charity for the poor, his love for his neighbor, his exact observance, his constant desire to mortify himself beyond his strength while still submitting to the judgment of his superiors, and his absolute docility in obedience. The testimonies of the acts of beatification are totally convincing. The life of St. Gabriel della Dolorosa was one of boundless generosity. But what is most extraordinary is the joy with which he knew how to consummate his sacrifice. Naturally, such a life has few picturesque details. Let us cite, as an example of the simplicity with which the saint tended to perfection, a passage from one of his biographies. But let us remember that beneath this apparent simplicity is hidden the enormous fatigue of constant self-examination. His penitential dissuade was insatiable. For a long time he asked permission to wear a rough metal sackcloth. His director denied him, but the saint continued to ask for it modestly. His director would say to him, "You want at all costs to wear a poor little chain, when what you really need is to chain your will. Go away and speak to me no more of them." The saint withdrew deeply mortified. On another occasion, his director said to him to the same purpose, Since you are so eager for that Silas, I give you permission to wear it, but you must wear it on top of your habit and in full view of everyone, so that everyone may know how mortified you are." In spite of the humiliation this caused him, Gabriel put on the Silas as his director had instructed. This made his companions laugh a lot, but Gabriel endured it in silence, without asking to be dispensed from that mortification which made him ridiculous. When he had barely been in religion for 4 years, in the course of which Brother Gabriel was already letting us guess the fruit he would reap in souls on reaching the priesthood, the first symptoms of tuberculosis appeared. His superiors were forced to dispense him, much against the saint's will, from the duties of community life. Patience in weakness and bodily sufferings, and total submission to the restrictions imposed on him by his superiors, became the main characteristics of the saint. His exercise deeply impressed everyone, but he carefully avoided being noticed, and shortly before his death, he destroyed all the spiritual notes in which he spoke of the graces that God had showered upon him. He died peacefully in the early morning of February 27, 1862, in Isola di Gran Sasso in Abruzzo. Saint Gabriel della Dolorosa was canonized in 1920.